What happens when the dog gets it right? What happens when the dog gets it wrong? What tools do you use?
I could be a mess, stressed in yesterday. He don't care less. He sees me anyway. Yeah, he sees me anyway. My dog thinks I'm great. He thinks I'm number one. He never hates, even when I'm done.
I wanted to talk a little bit about how to choose a dog trainer. Dog training is an unregulated field. Anybody can go out, they can print a business card, create a website, and call themselves a dog trainer even though they have no idea what they're doing. I've talked about my journey and why I am what I prefer to call a science-based trainer. One of the organizations I belong to is called the Pet Professional Guild, and I've been a member of that very early on in its inception. I had some friends that were originally on the board, and so I was watching all of the formation of this organization. I'm very proud to be a part of it. I'm not being paid to endorse this organization. It's something that I feel very passionate about. One of the things that I really like about the PPG, Pet Professional Guild, is they have a standard of ethics that each member has to maintain. For example, I talked about in a previous podcast about the fallout and the potential problems with punishment. The PPG requires that its trainers don't adhere to any of that. The art class that I took in critiquing our work, again, in the scientific definition, that is positive punishment. We've added something, the critique, to reduce the frequency of a behavior, the poor technique or whatever. But the key to that is I didn't feel bad about it. I avoided it because I wanted to get better, but I didn't feel bad. And it's the same thing when we're working with their dogs. It may be technically positive punishment, but if my dog is chewing on a coffee table leg and I say no, that's positive punishment. I've added the no to reduce the chewing on the coffee table behavior. Okay, but it doesn't mean I'm then going to get up and grab a newspaper and hit the dog on the rump or yell at them. Further, I'm going to give them something else to do. So again, we get back to that. It's not enough to tell a dog what not to do, but we've got to let them know what we do expect and what is appropriate. I'm getting off a little bit on a tangent here, but this is one of the most important things to me. We had a trainer at one of the local rescues. I was looking to do some volunteer work, and I asked them about their trainer that they had there for these dogs, and every dog that came in, this trainer, and I use that term loosely, would put a prong collar on the dog. I talked about, again, my journey. I did use choke collars, which was pretty much the extent of any equipment that I use, but I never felt it necessary to put a prong collar on a dog. I've never used a prong collar on a dog. I have a scar on my arm. That's actually two parallel scars from a choke or from a prong collar, which is part of the reason I won't use them, is because I know the damage that they can do. Just to be clear, I have worked with aggressive dogs. I've worked with dogs with certain types of anxiety. I've worked with basic pet manners. I've worked with Rotties and Pit Bull Terriers and Great Danes and Huskies, and I've been doing this for 15 years, teaching group classes aside from my private clients, and I've worked with dogs all shapes, all sizes, all breeds. There's never been an instance where I felt it necessary to use a shock collar or prong collar. It can be done, and I do not have as much experience as people like Ian Dunbar and Sarah Colnice and Patricia McConnell and some of these people that have been doing this for years, much longer than I have, successfully. So there's no reason for it. Once again, I've gotten off on kind of a tangent, and now I have to find in my notes where I was, but the point being, when you're looking for a trainer, ask them what tools they're going to use. And for me, we use a leash and collar, and particularly private clients, we usually don't even use that because we have the dogs contained and I'm not worried about them running off. The facility where I teach group classes, I've mentioned it's about 8,500 square feet, if I remember correctly. So we don't want the dog to get away because it's going to take a minute to catch them, and there's usually a bunch of other dogs in the facility. So we do want to kind of have that safety backup, I like to call it. The only other thing I use is some type of reinforcer. Usually it's food, and we talked about that in a previous episode, but sometimes it's toys. I have a squeaky toy I keep in my bag that I take to all my training appointments, and a lot of times I can just use that, squeak it a couple of times, and it gets a dog's attention. It gets it off of whatever the issue might be, whether it's just a dog running by, or if they're just barking, excited about playing with the other dogs, and it's like, well, we're in the middle of class, you got to wait. We'll have some socialization time, but pay attention now and please be quiet so everybody can hear me. So that's it. That's all I use. Those are the tools. Those are the tools any reputable trainer would need. You also want to ask any potential trainer that you're going to hire, what happens if the dog gets something right? With the dogs I work with, they get lots of pets, lots of praise, whatever that reinforcer is that we're using. If it's a tug toy, we'll play for a second. If it's food reward, we're going to give them that. Then we ask, what happens if the dog gets it wrong? Is the trainer saying use a leash correction, swat him on the nose, spray him with a water bottle, smack him on the butt? Those are the things you want to avoid. Again, it's not giving any information. It's just we're just stopping the behavior. We're not telling the dog what is expected. So in my case, what I like to do, I call it a reset. We'll do something else, basically says that opportunity is lost, and then we're going to come back and try it again. So usually it's something as simple as leading the dog to walk in I spin where I'm standing and the dog walks around me. We'll take a few steps forward so that we're in a different location. It's like that opportunity's lost. We're doing something else. We're just moving a little bit, and now we're going to try again. Because one of the things, and I'm going to talk about this in a later podcast, talk about cues, visual and verbal, but for one of the things we want to avoid, they ask for a sit, the dog doesn't sit, and so it's sit, 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 sit. And then it loses all meaning, and so we don't get the behavior that we want, and you've kind of eliminated any meaning that word is going to have for the dog. And again, we'll talk about this more in depth in another episode. But so we want to say the cue once. If we don't get the behavior, in my case, we do a reset, and then we try again. And we may try something different. So for example, when I do a down, I can't remember if I think I talked about a B hand, but it's where you place a treat in your palm and you fold your thumb over it. You hold the treat so the dog can't get to it, but they can see it, they can smell it. They just can't get it until you release it. And I call it a B hand because it looks like a B in American Sign Language. So we have the B hand. What we're going to do is hold that palm down and then go straight down in front of the dog. And the idea is, as the dog tries to get under your hand to get to that treat, they're going to go down on their elbow. And then we kind of pull our hands slowly away, and the dog stretches out into a down. That's the idea. That's how we hope it works. But I've said before that what I teach works about 80% of the time. This technique works about 50% of the time, and particularly small dogs. I think because they're already so small, it's a little intimidating. They don't want to get any smaller, quote unquote. So it can be difficult to get those down. So we may try something different. For example, I may just slowly bring my hand in towards the dog's chest, and the idea there is, as they kind of back up to keep an eye on that treat, they go into a down. It's kind of like folding up one of the old lawn chairs, not the new camp chairs, but the old lawn chairs from the 70s that everybody had on their porch. Kind of dating myself there, but there it is. Another technique, you've probably seen this, is you sit on the floor, and if the dog's small enough, you want to set your leg so that they can go under it. And you want your leg low enough that they have to lay down to go under your leg, but high enough that they can actually get through it. And so once you lure them through under your leg, when they hit that, they're in a down, they're all the way down, then you would stop and you would give them the reinforcement, and then you raise your leg slowly over time until they get used to the leg not being there. So there's a couple of techniques, but it illustrates, if the dog gets something wrong, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do a reset. If it doesn't work, we've got other techniques that we can try, whether it's a down or a sit or a recall or loose leash walking, whatever it happens to be. They're not getting a shock. They're not getting a leash correction. They're not getting swatted on the backside, anything like that. It's waiting for the dog to figure it out. If the dog figures it out on their own, they're going to have that behavior so much better than if they're waiting for that shock or that leash correction or whatever it happens to be. So we just don't use those. And actually the learning process is a lot faster. And as I've said before, when they do it, they're going to do it faster, they're going to do it better, they're going to do it longer if they have a good association with it. Another question I would like to ask if I was looking for a trainer is, where did you get your education? So again, this is an unregulated field. There's nowhere that you have to go to get your education. So for me personally, I went to Companion Animal Sciences Institute. I found it very informative. The information I would put against any 101 psychology class, it was just really well done as far as getting the reasons for the behaviors and the psychology behind it. And then there was a section on the hands-on stuff and the training stuff also, but once you had that background, you knew how to address those problems and the science behind it. That being said, I know some trainers who just went around and found mentors to help them, and they are excellent trainers, and I've learned a lot from them. I know other people that have gone to, well, I don't want to name names, but other organizations, and I wouldn't trust them with a plant. It gives you an idea by asking this question where they got their information from, but it's only one piece of the puzzle. You don't want to rely solely on that information. Something else I see a lot of is someone will say they're a dog trainer and just bring me all your dogs and I'll train them. For me, for example, like I said, I worked with a couple of aggression cases and we had success, but I found that me personally, I don't have the temperament for it. I was so stressed after those classes, I just could not deal with it. So I don't do a lot of aggression cases, particularly not some that are extreme, but I do specialize in puppies, which there are a lot of key developmental stages that dogs go through as they're growing in that first year until they reach sexual maturity, that it can have a lasting impact on their behaviors. I mentioned Puck before. He was severely abused before we got him, and he was never 100%. Knowing what they're going through at those puppy stages, I can address that so that we don't have long-term problems later. So ask what they specialize in. A good trainer will say, hey, that's not my area of expertise, but here's somebody I know that you can go to. Here's how to find a good trainer that can address that issue. All trainers don't have to have all the answers, but a perfectly good answer is, I know somebody that can help you with that. I would also ask a trainer that I was thinking about hiring is, who is your favorite trainer? If it's somebody like, what was her name? Susan Waterhouse? Very old trainer from 70s, 80s, that relied a lot on leash corrections and stuff like that. Yeah, I would probably avoid that person, not just because I disagree with the methods, but because that trainer is so old. Sometimes there's nothing wrong with that, and I don't know, the first example that comes to mind is, we still talk about Skinner and Piaget with kids, and Pavlov and stuff like that. That stuff is still relevant. So, someone said, I like them. It's like, okay, I'd ask them to expand a little bit on that, but there's nothing wrong with those people. Old does not necessarily mean we need to discount that information, but it just means that we need to keep checking to make sure it's relevant. And so, Skinner and Pavlov and those names, we've seen again and again that they had set that foundation appropriately, and it's kind of led to where dog training is going at this point. So some of my favorite trainers, I've mentioned Patricia McConnell before. I very much like Sarah Kalnai's. Her videos are just phenomenal, or DVDs are just phenomenal as far as body language and behavior and stuff like that. There's too many to mention, but I am in several groups on social media and several forums. If I have a question, I have these people that I know are like-minded that I can go to, and I can recommend them as some of my favorite trainers. I'm hoping to have some of these trainers on once I figure out how all this podcast stuff works, I think I'm off to a good start, but I'm still kind of messing with the tweaking and whatnot. But anyway, a couple of red flags to look for. I was listening to a podcast not too long ago, and I can't remember which one it was because I've been listening to a lot of them lately, but what they were saying is, in the United States, a behaviorist is a PhD level education, whereas in, I think I said, the UK, you don't have to have a PhD to call yourself a behaviorist. So you want to be aware of those types of things. What terminology are they using, and do they have the credentials to back it up, and how does that apply in your area, in your region, in your country, whatever it happens to be. I'm always very clear. When I went to CASI, I got my certification for dog training. We studied behavior a lot. I went on to get my psychology degree, but I would never call myself a behaviorist. I've studied behavior, but I'm not a behaviorist. And I always make that very clear when people are asking me about my background. I want to be very forthcoming. Another thing you can do is look at the website or social media and see what they say, and if you agree with it, if it aligns with how you want your dog to be treated, if it aligns with the science. Look for videos, look for photographs. Do the dogs look happy? Are they engaged with the person? I saw this one photo of a trainer that I do not care for at all. I think he's one of the worst trainers in the world. I won't mention names, but he's sitting on a stoop. He's got like 4 or 5 dogs around him, and all of the dogs are disengaged. They've got their heads down. They're doing lookaways. You can see some of the dogs are panting, which is a sign of stress. None of those dogs look happy, and he's like, here I am with a big grin on my face, and aren't I wonderful because I have all these dogs together and they're not causing problems? And it's like, well, yeah, you are causing problems. It's just not something you have to deal with immediately because the dogs have pretty much shut down or are so stressed they're not doing anything. So look at that social media and how do the dogs look, and how are they interacting with the person, with the trainer or trainers if they have several on staff. And another thing you can look at is some of the organizations. For example, part of the reason the Pet Professional Guild was started was we wanted to set that ethical standard, and some of the big names that have been out there for a while, and one of the reasons we were having a problem and didn't want to join these organizations was because anybody could join if you just paid your dues. They have no problem using shock and prong and choke collars, even though the science is there that says these things can be detrimental to the training process. So, I like the Pet Professional Guild. I like Karen Pryor, and I'm a member of Family Paws Parent Education, which isn't really training. It's more a program for people that have a dog and are dealing with newborns and toddlers. But again, they have an ethical standard. Find out about these organizations, and if you agree with their mission statements, and if that is somebody that you would want working with your dog. So those are some things to think about when you're looking for a trainer. I do personal training sessions. If you're interested and you're in the area, I pretty much cover just mid-Missouri. Even if you don't want to use my services, make sure you're making an informed decision when you bring someone into your home to help with your pets, your family member. If you would, leave a comment. You can follow me. It goes a long way to keeping me motivated. It lets me know that you're interested in what I have to say and you find this information helpful. Thank you for joining me. If you want to follow, if you want to leave a comment, it goes a long way to help keeping me motivated. It's very reinforcing. Lets me know that the information, you're finding the information useful. You can leave a comment, or you can email me at bishopsgatetraining@gmail.com if you have something that you'd like to hear me talk about, or if you just have a question that maybe I could help with. And we'll see you next time.